What's up, everybody? It's Jared with Capture the Magic, and a lot of you are probably aware of the very tragic incident that happened at Epic Universe where a guest rode Stardust Racers a couple of weeks ago and died while on the attraction. And it came out after the fact, after a little bit of the investigation that is still ongoing, that he died from multiple blunt force trauma, which has led to a lot of questions about what happened here. And then the family of the deceased victim has hired an attorney, a very well-known civil rights attorney, Ben Crump, and they gave a press conference yet again today. This is the second press conference that they have given on this, and making some pretty strong claims, including they are claiming that other guests have come forward stating that Stardust Racers is not a safe attraction. So we have an article here from WWNT talking about this. We're going to read through it, give some thoughts, and see what the updates are currently involving this incident. And I'll just say from the forefront, it's probably pretty obvious. I'm not a lawyer, but I do know theme park operations. So I've also had many Universal team members reach out to me to give me an idea of some of the internal workings, what they are told to do, and how this lines up with what the victim's family's attorney is claiming in many instances. But WWNT has a very strong headline here. It says, guest warned someone was going to get killed. Family demands answers after fatal Universal ride. It says Universal has allegedly not contacted the family of the guest who died after riding Stardust Racers at Universal Epic Universe, and their attorney says multiple riders have come forward with their own stories of injuries on the ride. Attorney Ben Crump hosted a press conference on Tuesday morning regarding the death of 32-year-old Kevin Rodriguez Zavala, who passed away from multiple blunt impact injuries after riding Stardust Racers on September 17th. In addition to Crump, present at the press conference were attorneys Natalie Jackson, Paul Grinke, and Aaron DeCal, and members of Zavala's family, including his parents, his sister and her husband, his brother, and his girlfriend of 10 years who was on Stardust Racers with him. So that was a question out there. We knew his girlfriend was with him in the park. It was unaware or unclear if she was on the ride with him. So it does seem like that she was with him on this attraction. So I guess that does clear up a little bit more details there. Universal claimed in a message to team members that their internal findings confirm ride systems functioned as intended. Still, Zavala's death is being investigated under Florida's manslaughter statute. Now, it is being investigated as a manslaughter, but basically they said in another article, I think it was from Channel 6 in Orlando, that it basically is a catch-all term in this sort of death here. So I don't believe they're looking at bringing charges. I mean, they could, but at this point, but it's being investigated just as a manslaughter, just given the way in which this death happened. It just kind of falls underneath that. Zavala was unresponsive at the end of the ride, and CPR was performed before he was taken to a hospital where he was pronounced dead after 10 p.m. Zavala was born with spinal cord atrophy. According to the Epic Universe Safety and Accessibility Guide, Stardust Racers is not allowed for guests with back, neck, or similar physical conditions, or guests with recent surgery or other conditions that may be aggravated by this ride. Guests should also be able to independently, 1, maintain an upright position, 2, support your torso, neck, and head while absorbing sudden and dramatic movements, and 3, brace your body with at least one natural upper extremity. I mean, you don't hire Ben Crump and don't plan to take this to trial or some sort of settlement here, so if it goes to trial, I'm sure that Universal is going to really focus in on that, as obviously, I do believe if they are giving those warnings, that would apply to the condition or the state and physical state of Mr. Zavala riding this attraction. I'm sure that's definitely something they would focus on. Crump and Zavala's father, Carlos, both said that he loved theme parks and rode roller coasters everywhere without an issue. He was an enthusiast, and the rides helped make him feel free. Crump called it offensive and insulting to say Zavala's injuries were the cause of his death. He noted that Universal team members helped Kevin, who used a wheelchair, board the coaster and asked if they, Universal, believe disabled people shouldn't be on the coaster, then why would they help him? So that right there is going to be the crux of all of this. Now, of course, they're going to make it a big issue to point out that his injuries were not the cause of his death in terms of his paralysis. But obviously, this is going to be something that's brought up because of the nature of his condition and the warnings of this ride. So obviously, at this point, we don't know. This is just speculation, but it is, a reason to question these things. And of course, this is the first death we've had on this ride, or many times on roller coasters in the recent history, in terms of this type of incident happening where nothing, happened on the ride necessarily that went wrong. It was just part of the ride itself. So I think obviously they know this is going to be brought up, so they're already trying to get ahead of it, essentially, because this is what their job is going to be to do. They want the family to get a big payout. They want to make money, so obviously this is something they're going to focus on. And they're yet again talking about a Universal team member helped him onto the attraction. Now, I've had multiple team members tell me they don't believe this for a second, because this is drilled into employees that you do not help disabled guests or really anybody onto a ride. I know they do the same thing at Disney, and many theme parks do this because then the culpability would lie on them, which is obviously what they're looking at here in terms of if a Universal team member helped them onto the attraction. This is something clearly mentioning this twice now. This is the second time in another press conference they're mentioning this. This is going to be their point of contention. But I would also believe this is something that could be easily provable, because I'm going to assume that there are cameras on the loading station. And I suppose they could get into the semantics of what is helping somebody, because technically I believe Universal team members can provide you with some sort of contraption that they can use to help themselves onto the ride, and a family member can help you onto the ride. Somebody in your party can, but a Universal team member is not allowed to. So it could be a little bit of splitting hairs. Maybe they provided him some sort of instrument to allow him to be able to help himself onto the ride, but not a Universal team member actually physically helping them. So that may be what they're talking about. If a team member did help them onto the attraction, that would be definitely against what Universal trains their employees to do. But like I said, we don't know. Surely the camera footage will show one way or the other. But I do believe the team members have spoken to me. They don't know each other, the ones that spoke to me, and they all basically said the same thing. Like, I don't believe this for a second, because no employee is going to risk their job and all these things to help somebody onto an attraction. Though Crump and the family are still waiting for a full autopsy report, they say Zavala's injuries were extensive. Zavala was fully conscious when he boarded the ride. At the first drop, he reportedly lurched forward and hit his head, and from that point on, his head was hit multiple times, leading to multiple blunt force injuries and lacerations. Witnesses who have reached out to the family and law firms say that the scene afterwards was chaotic, with Zavala completely slumped over. They said the ride staff wasn't helping and were not prepared to address an emergency. The witnesses say it took too long for life-saving measures to be performed. Although Crump did not want to speculate about the specific response time, he said Universal should know how long exactly it took. Now, that one, just on its face, from what we've heard of some eyewitness reports and just of what I would assume would happen in a situation like this, because someone comes into the coast, the loading station, people get off and people come back on, I have a hard time believing that they waited like minutes for them to figure out that something was wrong here. As it was also reported when they pulled into the station, we're assuming his girlfriend was yelling, "Help, help," like something had gone wrong. So I don't think that they necessarily stood around here. And from what we've heard from eyewitness reports as well, that they ordered everybody off the loading platform, and that CPR was, basically started right away. We know, at least from one eyewitness report, a lady jumped over the fence to help that was reportedly a doctor. There was also Universal medical staff on hand. They did call in the firefighters, and EMTs came in. So the fact that he didn't want to go into speculate how long it took, I have a hard time believing that they just stood around or anything of that nature after people figured out what had happened here. I'm sure it was chaotic. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure it was chaotic, but I just have a hard time believing that you just had employees standing around doing nothing whenever they saw somebody in the state that he was likely in. They say others injured on Stardust Racers. Alongside witnesses, other riders have shared stories of their own injuries on Stardust Racers prior to Zavala's death. The other people who were complaining, they were not disabled people, yet they were having problems with being injured on this ride, said Crump. The other complaints, which were shared with the attorneys directly on social media, seemed to follow a consistent pattern of problems with the ride's restraints, causing riders to be thrown forward and hit the bar in front of them. Crump said that these complaints align with Zavala's girlfriend's account of his injuries. Crump cited the recent lawsuit against Universal from a woman who claimed injury on Stardust Racers on April 30th, 2025 during previews of the park, 3 weeks before its official May 22nd opening. 49-year-old Sandy Streets said the coaster caused her head to shake violently and slam against the headrest, and that it lacked proper head restraints. Universal settled that lawsuit within a few days, and that was literally like last week when that one happened. That was an undisclosed amount. That lawsuit popped up after this incident here. In response to a question about the settlement, Crump said there's speculation that Universal is trying to silence riders, but that if, quote, if they really believe safety is primary, as they have said, they should let people come forward. I haven't heard anything about Universal silencing anybody. I find that very hard to believe because you have social media. Like I don't know how Universal would be out here silencing people unless they're talking about they're bringing forth a lawsuit. And if there is a settlement, I'm sure there's some clause in there that says like you can't go out and, continue to talk about this after the fact. That would be my guess. But I think Crump here is going to make a lot of claims I don't know a lot about him. I've learned a bit about him since this whole thing has happened. A lot of comments about him on videos here and looking into him. I'll just say he seems to be very aggressive in what he wants to get done. I guess we can put it that way. So that claim, there's no evidence to support what he's saying and essentially just throwing out accusations here. I have a hard time understanding how Universal would actually go about doing this if somebody was injured and wanting to make a claim about it. I haven't, at least for me personally, I haven't heard anything that would support what he's claiming there. Zavala's sister Lisa read the following testimonial from a guest who previously passed out on Stardust Racers in May. It says, quote, "This is so tragic. I also wanted to share with you that I too was severely injured at Universal back in May. I too lost consciousness, suffered a concussion, injuries to my neck and spine. I warned the park representative that exactly something like this was going to happen to somebody. I have pictures of my injury and I was taken to the emergency room after the incident. I too passed out and my child had to watch me just flailing and my head hitting and then had to be taken off, leaned against a wall where I had no vision, my eyelids fluttering rapidly. After about 30 minutes, they wheelchaired me through the park to the medical office on property. I told them I had a problem with these excessive speed launches and that someone is going to severely get injured or possibly lose their life. I know I was really scared. I also know I am not the only one who has been injured like this. They know they have problems with these rides. The staff keep asking me, was it the first launch or the second launch? They know there's a problem." So this was shared via the GoFundMe. They're not attributing it to a name to anybody here. But we do know, at least I'm aware of, 2 prior incidents on Stardust Racers where 2 different guests were injured, as they are required to report injuries on attractions if you're talking about like Disney and Universal and theme parks of that size. And one of them, this sounds like very similar for what the injury report was, that a woman basically had blurred vision and things like that. But they did report as part of those incidents that had pre-existing medical conditions before riding the ride. This starts getting really tricky here because they're going to bring forward social media posts. This came through on the GoFundMe. So it's hard to know when she says, I told them I had a problem with these excessive speed launches, whether she's talking about she just has a problem with this one or she has problems with them in general. And if that's the case, I would also say probably don't ride Stardust Racers. But a lot of this, I think they are definitely going to focus on the ride itself not being safe. They're not even going after, like, they're not even basically saying that Universal is wrong in that the ride functioned that was supposed to. They're essentially going after Universal, and it would be Mack Rides who created this coaster, built or made this coaster. They're going to be going after them, saying the ride itself and how it's designed is unsafe. Given these injury reports and more, Zavala's family believes Universal missed multiple warning signs. The responsibility lies at the feet of Universal, not at Kevin or his girlfriend, not at the disabled community, not at the previous riders who were injured. Responsibility lies at the feet of the Universal Studios, said Crump. The fact that injured riders spoke to Universal should be enough. Crump's team is communicating with state and local officials about creating greater government oversight for companies like Universal who self-report injuries. According to Crump, Universal has made 4 Epic Universe reports, 3 for Stardust Racers and 1 for Hiccup's Wing Gliders. 3 of the 4 were published in the quarterly report by the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services this summer. Universal concluded all these incidents were due to guests' pre-existing conditions, which Crump believes is blaming the victims. So essentially, he's sitting here claiming that Universal is just operating in unsafe attractions. This is why ride warnings are there. This is why they state repeatedly on these attractions, if you experience any of these type of symptoms or these medical conditions, do not ride these rides. And if you do ride these rides with a pre-existing medical condition, I mean, the onus is on you at some point there. I mean, if you have a heart condition and you ride a roller coaster and you have a heart attack, it's not the fault of the theme park. And this has happened before. I mean, injury reports, like they're claiming all these things about Universal, but injury reports, if you look through these, they're not highly publicized, but you can find them from Disney and Universal. People get hurt on rides pretty consistently. I mean, different reasons happen, different things happen. Right out the bat, Crump's is wanting more government oversight on these things, and we don't even know the full details yet. So it seems that obviously they're trying to build toward a case here, but to have 4 incidents, and this park's been open and running for officially 4 months, but you had multiple months of preview. So you got at least 6 months here of this park running, and you have 4 published incidents out of all the people that have been to Epic Universe. That's really not that many. And it's not victim blaming if you report these incidents and say that they also had a pre-existing condition. Now, you would have an issue if you had a perfectly healthy person or multiple perfectly healthy people ride these attractions and they're getting injured. Now, that is obviously something different, but if you're having the people that are injured having pre-existing conditions, that the warning signs were there telling them, they fell into a category they shouldn't have ridden these, and they ride them, I just have a hard time saying that's Universal's fault or Disney's fault or any other theme park's fault. I mean, if a ride passes inspection, it's built to code, and you have the warnings there, the guest has to take some responsibility in terms of their current medical condition, and are they fit enough, and are they in a good enough state to ride these attractions? Crump previously represented the family of 14-year-old Tyrese Sampson, who passed away after riding an attraction at Icon Park in 2022. This incident led to the creation and passing of the Tyrese Sampson Act, which created stricter safety requirements for theme park rides. That was a very terrible incident. So that one had a malfunction. That is not what they are alleging here with Stardust Racers. They're not even claiming that Universal team members, other than they're claiming, helped him onto the attraction. They're not claiming that he wasn't restrained correctly or anything of that nature. They're going after the ride itself, and not that anything catastrophic in terms of the ride malfunctioning happened here. But that did happen in Icon Park, which is a completely different scenario. It says, "We believe that this is a matter of great public concern," said attorney Paul Greenkey. "We have great concerns about the safety of this ride to the greater public." Greenkey said their team of experts is investigating, and Universal is cooperating with regards to scheduling a time for the team to gain access. However, Universal has not agreed to share surveillance videos, so they do have surveillance videos. The experts will examine everything from the ride's design to the seat materials and restraints. They are calling for the ride to be made safe, and that it should not go back into operation until all investigations have been concluded, and Stardust Racers has been closed since the incident. Zavala's father said Universal has not communicated with the family. They have not called or emailed. It's like nothing happened to them, but it happened to us, he said. The Zavala family and Kevin's girlfriend are all going through intense counseling. The attorneys and family continue to ask the public to come forward if they have any issues on Stardust Racers. Now, in terms of Stardust Racers itself, there's a lot of questions about, like, when is this ride going to reopen, or is any changes going to be made? Who knows? I've talked about on here with some of the Orange Grove 55 guys about some potential things that could happen here, but of course that is just speculation. I haven't heard anything about when this ride could reopen, but Orlando Theme Park Zone does say that a boom lift and construction lights spotted near Stardust Racers track at Universal's Epic Universe. And it says here that this is from Twitter X, that boom lifts and construction lights near the track of Stardust Racers have been sighted, and the thinking or potential thing that they could do here, some people are saying they could add trim brakes to the attraction to slow it down in maybe one or two certain spots on the ride. Rumors suggest more trim brakes could be added to Epic Universe roller coaster, which is currently closed. And the definition of a trim brake can be found. It says a trim brake is used to reduce the speed of a roller coaster train along sections of track to keep it exceeding the top speed recommended by the ride manufacturer. It is one of the first features some enthusiasts look for when scouring over new roller coaster blueprints. We do know trim brakes had already been added to Stardust Racers after testing. At Park Twisted posted the following on June 20th, and it says closer look at the trim brakes that were added to Stardust Racers after testing proved the ride was too extreme for general audiences. So they have added trim brakes before on this attraction, so the thinking there is they could add more. There's also questions around would they change the ride harness, because that is another thing that the family's attorney is obviously going after, is the ride harness here. Now, first and foremost, this whole thing is tragic. A man lost his life at a theme park riding an attraction. Like, that is very sad. And I feel terrible for his family. obviously thoughts and prayers to them. It's a very difficult time. So I'm not going to remotely say that, I know some people pointed to the fact that they hired Ben Crump, that, they lawyered up all these things. I'm not going to go at the family about this because they're going through a terrible time right now, wanting answers. And I can't even imagine being in that position. But when you're looking at this whole thing, they didn't make any new claims necessarily. They're basically doubling down on what they basically said the first press conference, which is they're claiming the ride itself is unsafe, that a team member from Universal helped him onto the attraction. Obviously they're just looking for anything at this point from the lawyer's perspective they can use to try and, in my opinion, get a bigger settlement. But Universal came out and said that the ride functioned as it was supposed to. The investigators have agreed with Universal. So there's really no argument about the performance of the ride in terms of a piece coming off. There were rumors out there that a piece had came off and hit him or something along those lines. That's not being claimed by anybody in this case. They're going to go after the entire basically thing here, this whole system that this ride is going to be able to be created under. And then they're bringing in, accounts of others looking for more people to come forward that were injured on this ride, obviously to bolster their case. And I'm not going to claim to know how this would go in a courtroom. And that's the big question here of whenever the investigation, whatever they come out and say, that when it's finalized, I'm sure right after that happens, there's going to be a lawsuit by the family's attorney at Universal. And then I suppose the question is going to be, does Universal want to take this to a trial or do they go for a settlement? I would assume they would probably try to settle this out of court, just given the optics of taking a guest that died at your theme park, taking their family to court over this incident would not be the best optics. And the other reason I think they could settle as well, because I think Ben Crump is probably going to do weekly press conferences on this. And every time he does this, he's basically going to come out and just try and paint Universal in the worst light possible. And this is probably part of their strategy, is to do this and basically just be like, I'm going to come out here constantly and say all these things. And again, we don't know, like they're talking about people on social media. They're talking about people left a message on the GoFundMe. These things are unsubstantiated in terms of there hasn't been a third party look at this and says, yes, this is an accurate statement. So essentially, and I'm not claiming that any of these people that are doing this are not telling the truth, but essentially someone could just come on and claim something on social media and Ben Crump is going to take that and run with it during a press conference probably. So they're sitting in a situation where they don't want that out there, I'm sure, if you're Universal. And so I think this probably leads to some sort of settlement here, but I think a lot of it is going to depend on the investigation, what they find. But I think a lot of this is going to hinge on, did a team member actually help him onto the attraction? That's going to be the crux, I think, of the family's lawyers' arguments here. If it comes out that they did not, and then it's just going to be about the ride itself, that could be a tough one to win if it went to court, I would assume, because then you're basically saying that the code and all these things that was built to, that was the issue here. So I think that would be a harder case to fight, which is probably why they're pointing to the team member here, because if they did help the guest, Kevin Rodriguez Zavala, onto the ride, then that would have some culpability on Universal, is my guess. Again, I'm just speculating here. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just talking about how I perceive all of this. And again, Ben Crump can say that it's victim blaming to say that people with pre-existing conditions riding attractions getting hurt is victim blaming, but that is why ride warnings are there. I mean, if you had back surgery and you rode an attraction like Stardust Racers and it tells you if you have back issues not to ride it and you end up getting hurt, I mean, they have told you that if you have that issue, don't ride this attraction. So again, this is why they have ride warnings on attractions for these very reasons. And if people fall into pre-existing conditions, that obviously is going to be something that is looked into. It doesn't necessarily mean what happened here is simply because of, he was a paraplegic, had a spinal cord injury, but it obviously brings into a lot of questions, as this is the first time this type of incident has happened, of course, on this ride in particular. And so if you had thousands of people riding this attraction that did not have this incident happen, and then this one happens, and part of it is he happened to be paralyzed, of course, you're going to look at that, and that's going to bring into question about things. It doesn't necessarily mean that that is the ultimate reason for it, but of course, people are going to look at that, and I think rightfully so, to look at, was that one of the things that led to this very tragic outcome. But that is the latest on this as of right now. But when there is more information on this, we'll let you know right here on this channel. But for now, that is going to be it, though, for this video. So if you like this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel, as we do all this coverage here of Universal Studios, Epic Universe, Disney World, and pop culture. And let us know in the comments, what do you think about all this? And until next time, we will see you in the parks.